On April 2nd, 2000, in Middlesbrough, a couple had just moved into their new house. While they were settling in, they decided to explore the attic, where they found some boxes. The husband went through them to see if there was anything useful. As he searched, he discovered a tape. He told his wife about it, and they decided to play it. After listening for a few minutes, they realized the tape contained an interrogation between two government officials and a man named Hayes. The contents of the tape shook them to their core, so they took it with them to the police station. When the police asked what was on the tape, the couple explained that it was a conversation between a man named Hayes and two police officers. One of the unknown officials in the tape told Hayes that they wanted to talk to him about the future of his land, and questioned why Hayes was still living in a burnt-down house, even after being offered a lot of money to vacate the burnt house so that it can be used as a government establishment. Though they tried to persuade him, Hayes refused to leave. He said it wasn't that he didn't want to go, but that he couldn't leave the house. Slowly, Hayes began to reveal why he couldn't leave the house. Here's an account of what he said. I can't forget the 27th of November, 1950, when I walked Ariana down the aisle. She was looking so beautiful with her blue eyes, wearing a white V-neck shaped gown. In the presence of her mother and a few family members, I got married to the love of my life. We didn't have much money to travel for our honeymoon since we saved up to get a house, so we just moved in immediately. The house was perfect. At least that's what we thought when we first saw it. My wife, Ariana, and I were eager to start our new life together. The house was located in a quiet neighborhood. It had everything we wanted: a big backyard, a nice fireplace, and enough room for the family we planned to have one day. We moved in on a Saturday morning. Ariana and I were thrilled as we unpacked our boxes, laughing and dreaming about our future. The first few days were blissful. We spent our time decorating, choosing paint colors, and arranging furniture. Every evening we would sit by the fireplace, sipping wine and talking about our dreams. It was our little paradise. But then, things started to change. It began with small things that were almost unnoticeable. I would set my keys down on the kitchen counter, only to find them in the living room later. Ariana swore she closed the windows before bed, but in the morning, they would be wide open. I didn't think much about it, and blamed it on the stress of moving in. I knew we would settle in just fine. Then, Ariana started having nightmares. It began on the third night. She woke up all sweaty and panting like she was running away from something. Ariana told me she saw a woman in her dream, standing at the foot of our bed, staring at her with hollow eyes. I held her close and assured her it was just a bad dream. But the dreams didn't stop. Every night, Ariana would wake up screaming, her face pale and her body trembling. She described the woman in more detail each time. Long, tangled hair, a tattered dress, and her eyes were empty and soulless. She said the woman would whisper her name, Ariana, Ariana. I tried to comfort her, but I didn't believe her. I thought it was her mind playing tricks. I didn't want to admit that something might be wrong with our perfect new home. One night, Ariana shook me awake, and she was crying. She's here, she whispered. She's in the room with us. I was clearly frustrated and exhausted, so I tried to reassure Ariana that there was no one in the room and that she was just having another bad dream. But Ariana insisted that she could feel a presence watching us. I got out of bed and turned on the light. As expected, the room was empty. I told her to get some sleep. Ariana nodded, but she didn't sleep much that night, and neither did I. The next few days were tense. Ariana became more withdrawn, and I felt helpless. She barely ate, and dark circles formed under her eyes. She spent most of her time in bed, too scared to move around the house. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, she put her hands in mine and said to me that we need to leave the house. I was confused when Ariana told me she wanted to leave the house. I mean, we had just moved in, and the idea of packing up and going seemed ridiculous to me. I tried to reason with her, telling her we couldn't just leave because of a few bad dreams, but she was convinced that something was wrong and that the dreams were too real to ignore. She even said she didn't feel safe in the house. I could see how distressed she was, so I took her hand and tried to comfort her. I suggested that maybe seeing a doctor could help with the nightmares she was having. She agreed, and we decided to go together to the doctor the next day. Ariana went back to bed, and she still had another nightmare. This time, it was worse. She woke up screaming. When I tried to hold her, she pushed me away, her eyes wild with terror. I didn't know what to do. I felt helpless, unable to protect her from something I couldn't see or understand. The following day, I called a doctor. He prescribed some medication to help Ariana sleep, but it didn't work. The dreams continued. Her health deteriorated a lot. She lost weight, her skin turned pale, and she hardly spoke. One night, I decided to stay up and watch over her. I sat by her side as she slept. Around 1 a.m., I heard a faint whisper. At first, I thought it was Ariana talking in her sleep, but then I realized the voice was different. It was cold and distant, almost like a hiss. Ariana. Ariana. I looked around the room, but there was no one there. The voice grew louder. I shook Ariana, and she opened her eyes. Do you hear that? Ariana said, She's here. For the first time, I felt afraid. Maybe there was something wrong with this house. I held Ariana close, trying to protect her from whoever this monster was. I didn't know how to fight something I couldn't see. All I knew was that we had to find a way out before it was too late. It was just a week, and I was already so exhausted from all that had been happening in the house. The voice was now coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Ariana couldn't sleep anymore. She tried to sleep, but she stayed up at night, and I was also sleep deprived. I was so tired from all the stress, so I slept off around 5 a.m. after thinking about what's been going on the whole night. When I woke up, Ariana was sitting beside me mumbling something under her breath, but I couldn't make out the words. Suddenly, her eyes changed. They were vacant, hollow, as if she was looking through me. She stood up slowly, her movements jerky and unnatural. I tried to speak to her, but my voice caught in my throat. I whispered, Ariana, are you okay? She turned to look at me, but it wasn't her. The woman in front of me was a stranger, another version of my wife. Her lips curled into a sinister smile, and she started laughing weirdly. She's mine now, the voice said, but it wasn't Ariana's. It was deep and rough, almost like a whisper that makes you feel uneasy and afraid. I backed away and replied, What do you mean? Who are you? The monster inside Ariana's body laughed again. She belongs to me. There's no escape. The room grew colder, and Ariana's body convulsed. She fell back on the bed, unconscious. I rushed, trying to wake her, but she was unresponsive. I stayed by her side for a few hours, and then, when she woke up, she was acting differently. She moved slowly and didn't speak much. Even when she did, her voice was flat, without emotions. I tried to talk to her, to get her to open up, but it was like she was a different person. As the time passed, things got worse. Ariana's behavior became more weird. She would stare at the walls for hours, her eyes wide and not blinking. She stopped eating and barely slept. I was so confused, and I didn't know how to help her. One evening, I found her in the basement, standing in the dark, staring at the wall. I approached her slowly and asked, Ariana, what are you doing down here? She turned to face me. Her eyes were completely black. You can't save her. She's mine. I ran out of the basement and lost a total grip of myself. I was scared, yet I had to find a way to save Ariana and my unborn baby. I needed to free her from whatever was possessing her. I contacted a local priest who had experience with exorcisms. He agreed to come to the house and help us. The night of the exorcism was the most terrifying experience of my life. The priest arrived, carrying a bag filled with holy water, crucifixes, and ancient texts. He warned me that it would be dangerous and that there was no guarantee it would work. But I had to try. I couldn't lose Ariana. We went down to the basement, where Ariana was waiting. She was standing in the same spot, her eyes black and empty. The priest began the ritual, chanting prayers and sprinkling holy water around the room. Ariana started screaming in a loud voice that echoed through the house. She was twisting her body as the priest continued the exorcism. The voice inside her screamed in rage, cursing us. "Leave her! Leave her alone!" The priest held up a crucifix. With a loud voice he said, "In the name of God, I command you to leave this woman." Suddenly, Ariana's eyes snapped open, and she lunged at the priest with speed. Before I could react, she had him pinned to the ground. Her strength was terrifying, far beyond what should have been possible. The priest struggled, but she held him down effortlessly. I was screaming to stop her, but her mouth opened very wide, and with a horrifying growl, she bit into the priest's throat. Blood splashes everywhere as she tears at his flesh with her teeth. The priest's screams were cut short as she ripped him apart, piece by piece. I could hear the sound of tearing flesh and cracking bones that echoed through the basement. My whole body froze. I was not able to walk or even move away. The woman I loved, my sweet Ariana, was gone. In her place was a monstrous creature, driven by a hunger for destruction. When she finished, she turned to me with blood dripping from her mouth. Her eyes were still dark and empty. I backed away slowly, and I knew I had to get out, but I couldn't leave her behind. "Ariana, please come back to me." For a moment, she recognized me again. She reached out a blood-stained hand toward me, in a weak voice, and called out my name. "Hayes." It was as if she snapped. She twisted her neck in a strange way, and started heading towards me with a knife. I started screaming Ariana's name, hoping she would come back and recognize my voice. Well, she did. She recognized my voice and came back. I hugged her and kissed her, but she was unconscious. I put her on the bed so she could sleep and rest. When she woke up, she was acting normally, but she looked very pale and weak. So I made her something to eat, and we started watching TV together. But after a few minutes, she suddenly went crazy again and tried to kill me. I had to run away, and I barely made it out of the house. As soon as I got out, the house burst into flames and burned down. Maybe I feel guilty because I didn't listen to her when she said we should leave. That's why I'm living there now. It's my way of paying for my mistake. The official who was there said that everything Hayes told them was hard to believe because they had no evidence. The officer tried to show sympathy, but then asked, "If your wife was possessed and even killed the priest when she fell unconscious after murdering him, why didn't you escape or call the police? You should have at least reported the murder, even after the house burned down. Why didn't you report it? It's a bit confusing." Hayes stayed quiet for a few seconds, then admitted, "Because I made up the whole story." They were confused and asked, "Why'd you lie?" Well, the entire story wasn't a lie. I just changed a few things. You see, it wasn't my wife who butchered the priest. It was me. It wasn't my wife who burned the house. It was me. And it wasn't my wife who was possessed. It's me. The officials were in disbelief, but then Hayes' voice completely changed into the terrifying voice he had described earlier. He said, "I've had my fun. You are trespassers, and I will not let you leave." As soon as they heard that voice, they knew their lives were in danger. After that, nothing more was heard on the tape, only screams. The policeman checked the records and discovered that 2 officials had gone missing on the same day, about 30 years ago. That was when the policeman realized that the house the couple had just bought was built on the same land where a burnt house once stood until 30 years ago, before it was demolished. But it remained a mystery how that tape survived the demolition and ended up in the couple's house.